Macca's Guides.
Hey guys, Macca here. Welcome to my Game of the Year 2016 video where I list my top 10 games. Before we get started, I encourage you to list your top 10 games in the comments down below. There's going to be a ton of variety in everyone's decisions, and that includes my own. Not all of my top 10 games are going to be your favorite, but this is my countdown, and I'm going to be trying to explain why I like certain games and why they're placed in the position they are. For me, there's a unique reason that every single one of these games has made my cut, and for some cases, it's just that the game is extremely unique, even if it does have issues. In other cases, it's the fact that the gameplay is really solid and something that I really enjoyed and had a lot of fun playing. To me, a Game of the Year is a game that redefines the genre that it's in and is at the pinnacle of that genre when it comes out. So, as an example, past winners of my Game of the Year include Grand Theft Auto 5, Forza Horizon 2, and last year, Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. Now, you can't have a top 10 games list without a worst games list. Here are the 5 worst games I played this year in no particular order: Horse Racing 2016, Professional Farmer 2017, Monster Jam Crush It, Albedo Eyes from Outer Space, and Zeros. These games are literally unplayable in my opinion. I'll also be doing my honorable mentions after the top 10 this year, so let's just get started. Starting out at number 10, we have something that I already know will be a little bit controversial, and that's Virginia, a game that some people really liked, and a game that a lot of people didn't like, to say the least. Now, one of the reasons I enjoyed Virginia as much as I did is because it's truly a unique game and a unique experience. There's nothing I ever played like it, and I don't know if I ever will play a game like it again. Now, at certain points, it's hardly a game and feels much more familiar to a movie because the gameplay here is pretty limited. You'll primarily just find yourself interacting with objects in the world in order to progress the story, which is decent at points, but because there are no words exchanged, can be a little bit hard to follow. However, with that being said, the music in this game is absolutely the best music I've heard this year. Now, when you pair the music and the story with a minimalistic approach to the graphics, it becomes one of the more memorable experiences you can have, in my opinion. Now, I will say without a shadow of a doubt, this game is not going to be for everyone. It comes in at a little bit of a hefty price, it is a little bit of a walking simulator and has very little gameplay at times, and does come off as a little bit of an artsy-fartsy game. With that being said though, it was truly unique and was a great way for me to break up the constant barrage of shooters and action games coming out for the entire year. Personally, for me, this game made my top 10 for trying something different and, in my opinion, succeeding. In at the number 9 spot, I have yet another game that was made by a smaller studio, and that is Superhot. Superhot is another game that earned its place on the list by being completely unique, and in my opinion, one of the only properly functioning first-person shooter puzzle games on the market. Not only is the game itself unique, it's also very artistic, has really good audio, and the game mechanics are very robust. They were able to take a little bit of a gimmicky idea and turn it into an actual full-fledged game, and even though the story is pretty terrible, there are a lot of different ways you can enjoy the game outside of the story. The game also has a ton of replayability through different modes, and has that easy to play but hard to master style of gameplay that I love. You'll find yourself replaying levels over and over and over again just to shave a second off of your time. So again, similar to the number 10 spot, here we have a game that might not be perfect, but a game that is unique enough that it stands out amongst the hundreds of games that came out last year, therefore earning a place in the top 10. And now we're going to move on to some of the AAA hits. In at the number 8 spot, we have a first-person shooter and one of the best-selling games of the year, and that is Overwatch. Now, in my opinion, Overwatch probably has the most mass appeal out of any game that's come out this year, but was also in-depth enough to be a hit with hardcore gamers. Now look, I've heard just about every argument when it comes to Overwatch, like it only being half a game because it doesn't have a single player, or the graphics being directed at kids, or that the gameplay gets too repetitive too quickly. But in my opinion, that doesn't take away from the solid gameplay and what Blizzard has built there. It was a game where I could kick back, relax, play with a few friends, and not take it too competitively. It was a game that I played almost every day for a couple of weeks. It was a game that felt like every time I picked a new character, I was playing a new game. And also one of the few shooters where I felt like working as a team actually did something. After all was said and done this year, Overwatch was one of the few games that I ended up playing online for more than a few hours because I wanted to. And although it wasn't the first hero shooter to come out, and it did get a little repetitive after a couple of weeks, I still had a fun time playing this solid shooter with great gameplay mechanics and a lot of unique heroes that all played very differently and were able to contribute to their team's goal in different ways. Now we have back-to-back shooters in the countdown. In at the number 7 spot, I have Doom, and this one is primarily in the list because of its single player. Doom is a great example of a back-to-basic shooter, and also a great example of how to take an old IP and then upgrade it without losing its identity. Now, I thought I did a really good job explaining why I love this game in completed episode number 68, so here's a clip from that. Now, my relationship with this game has been quite the roller coaster, because when they first announced it, I was pretty hyped, and then when they showed me the first gameplay, I was very disappointed because it looked bland and lifeless. And then the game came out, and it's really good. Doom is the type of game that I've been waiting for a very long time, similar to my best shooter of 2014, which was Wolfenstein: The New Order. This is the perfect pick-up-and-play mindless shooter available on the market, and the gameplay is so fluid and precise. The graphics are great, the sound design is great, the music is great, the gameplay is great, it runs at a beautifully solid frame rate with no hiccups. The game's complete, it's not buggy, it doesn't feel like it's missing modes. This is everything I want from my shooters from now on. Now, I will be the first one to admit that the game's not perfect. I don't imagine the multiplayer standing the test of time and becoming an instant classic. I highly doubt many people will be playing it in months from now, and the actual campaign mode does have quite a few problems, considering its repetitive corridor shooter nature. For those of you who have followed me for many years, you know that my motto is gameplay is king, and that's what this game does really well, even though it has a couple of shortcomings in terms of level design and actual campaign pace. I'm almost always willing to look past small issues in a game if the gameplay feels right, and this is a perfect example of that. And also one of the reasons that I highly recommend that you play Doom on whatever console it is that you enjoy. Next on the list, we're going for the back-to-back shooters, is Titanfall 2, this year's highest rated first-person shooter on my list. Now, in my review of Titanfall 2, I was pretty vocal about the fact that I don't enjoy the multiplayer in this version of the game, but the campaign is one of the best campaigns I've played in a first-person shooter for years. Now, I reviewed this game earlier this year. Here is a 1-minute clip from that review talking about why I liked it so much. Now, as a complete package, the campaign is excellent. The story is good and well told. The game holds your attention all the way through. The pacing is excellent. The set pieces are memorable and enjoyable, and you always feel like you're doing something different. All in all, the campaign does a lot of things right. The balance of the different game mechanics in the game is actually incredible. You never feel like there's too much story or that you're too much of a pilot or too much of a Titan. The power dynamics between the two are very well defined. And as soon as you master one gameplay mechanic, a new one is introduced, which is something that I love. The movement along with the controls makes traversal an absolute delight. The combat is engaging and there's engaging action all the way through. There's a ton of variety, which includes some excellent platforming sections. All the weapons feel different and unique, and all of them feel useful, and the game is incredibly fast-paced. When you put all of these together, it makes for, like I've been saying, an excellent campaign package. Now, if you had told me 2 years ago that the next Titanfall would have a great campaign and that I wouldn't enjoy the multiplayer, I probably would have called you crazy, but that's exactly what the team delivered. Nonetheless, Titanfall 2 did deliver a great campaign and had great gameplay in that campaign, in my opinion, which earned it the number 6 spot. Now, in at number 5 is a game that I wish more people knew about, and that's Dirt Rally. Here's a game that officially made its way out of early access in late 2015 and was then slightly updated and ported over in 2016 to the consoles. It's also a game where for some reason most people forgot to include it in the Racing Game of the Year category on their website. But don't let that fool you. There is a reason this game has a high Metacritic rating, and there is a reason that the reviews from users on Steam are very positive. Dirt Rally's gameplay takes it back to a simpler time, a time where victories weren't handed to you and racing was actually difficult. You'll find yourself racing for extremely competitive times, even on lower difficulties, and making sure that you don't take damage during the stages that you'll have to then carry over for the rest of the event. On top of that, the game also looks and sounds incredible, which is always a nice thing to have alongside of really good and in-depth gameplay. There's nothing quite as exhilarating as barreling down a narrow road in the middle of a forest at night while it's raining, going 120 miles per hour. The game requires your full attention and will heavily penalize you if you're not listening to your co-driver. Now, we'll be the first one to admit this game's not going to be for everyone, and it is a little bit niche. You do have to be a racing fan, and you do have to take yourself pretty seriously while playing this game, and there is a pretty steep learning curve. However, if you invest the time, I think the game gives a lot back. It's one of the few proper and challenging racing games that have come out in past years. It's a game that focuses on rally, which is a little bit risky, but it absolutely pays off, and the game is excellent. For those reasons, I recommend it, and that's why it's actually so high on my list. The next game on my list is a game that I've been rooting for, and a game that I am pleased to announce is actually worthy of its position, and that's Hitman. Now, if I were to be reviewing Hitman based on the intro pack or Hitman based on what I played in March, this game would absolutely not be anywhere near my top 20. But if I were to have to review the entire first season as a package, they've made huge strides in making this a great game. Now, we can sit here all day and debate about whether releasing the game episodically was a good or bad idea, but at this point it doesn't matter because the whole first season is out. I can also sit here all day and complain about how the online servers were an absolute mess, and half the time I wanted to play the game, I wasn't able to. But again, that's a non-issue at this moment. What I will say is that the final package should make any Hitman fan or any stealth fan a happy gamer. Now, I will say that because the game was released episodically, not every level or every mission has the same caliber of design, but Episode 2, which is in Sapienza, Italy, is probably the greatest single piece of Hitman ever created. Now, it's not necessarily the graphics or the audio or the cool assassinations that make Hitman great. It's the ways in which you can get creative to kill your target. It's the ways in which you learn the area and figure out which enemies will get in your way and then create and execute the perfectly timed assassination. It's in the consistency yet sometimes unpredictability of the game design. I can name a ton of reasons for why I enjoyed the first season of Hitman, and they all come down to the gameplay. As long as you're willing to take the good with a little bit of the bad, hopping into Hitman after the first complete season is not a bad idea. In at the number 3 position, we have Inside. Inside was a surprise, a delight to play, and a great palate cleanser from some of the other games that came out. It's one of the rare times where a game is unmistakably a piece of art. Now, the game was in production for a very long time, and it ended up being a little bit short, but that's because of how tailored the experience is and how much attention to detail there is in every moment of the game. The graphics are nice and the sound design is good, but when it's all put together, it creates an atmosphere that can only be experienced. They created a beautiful world and told an excellent story that will absolutely make you think. Explaining why Inside is a great game is actually really difficult because from watching gameplay, you don't get the full sense, and if you go into the game without allowing yourself to fully experience it, you'll leave with mixed emotions. I will say that I don't think the puzzle design is as good as Limbo, and the game is definitely a lot easier to complete, but I will add to that I do recommend you pick up this game. That's why I put it all the way up at number 3, even though I know a lot of people consider it an artsy-fartsy game and don't even think it's worth a place on the top 10. In at the number 2 position, we have Uncharted 4, a game with incredible graphics, a game with incredible audio and level design, cinematic, storytelling, and narrative. It is a complete package. Something that Uncharted 4 does better than any other game I've ever seen is the attention to detail in the cinematics. And the reason I like the cinematics is not for the action-packed sequences or the large explosions, it's actually for the character-to-character interactions and the believability of their conversations. Naughty Dog did extremely well with building and developing complex characters within the cutscenes to the point where I actually cared about them. Now, the campaign mode itself is actually very well done. It's quite lengthy, clocking in at over 12 hours on your first playthrough. The gameplay mechanics are tied in well, and you'll find yourself visiting a bunch of unique locales during the campaign. I'll also add that Uncharted 4 is one of the few story-driven games that actually has replayability, and there's a lot of games that should take notes here. Uncharted 4 is a game that was made with love, and it shows, and it's one of the best put together games that I've played all year. I will say that I wasn't a huge fan of the multiplayer and that I wish the game took a few more risks in terms of innovation. Regardless, it's still one of the best and most memorable games I've played this year. And last but not least, my number 1 game of the year is Ben-Hur. Actually, I'm totally kidding, it's Forza Horizon 3. Forza Horizon 3 is pretty much everything I want from a racing game. It's open world and accessible while still remaining somewhat realistic and authentic. The graphics are a pleasure to look at, the cars sound great, and the radio stations provide great music. And I also continue to stand by a statement I made 2 years ago when Forza Horizon 2 came out, and that is that the Drivatar system makes the AI in the game behave like nothing you've seen before and drastically adds to the enjoyability. The locale of Australia was also an excellent choice and leads to a variety of locales that we can race on, as well as a very densely packed map once we get into later progression. There's a lot of small changes that easily make this the most playable racing game I've ever touched. The new blueprint system allows you to race exactly how you want and when you want, and the PR stunts are a great way to enjoy the open world and break up the circuit or point-to-point races. The gameplay here is as good as it gets in any racing game, and for me this year it's as good as it gets in any game. After playing Forza Horizon 2, I didn't think there was a lot more they could add to the series, but they did it with this game. The entire package, including the graphics, the sound, the variety of cars and tracks, the Drivatar system, all of the available options, the auction house, and the feel of the gameplay is the best experience I had this year, which is why the game is number 1 on my list. Thank you so much for watching the top 10. There's a few things I did want to touch on, and those are the honorable mentions. In the 11th spot, that was so close to the top 10, but I scratched at the last minute. I do have Ratchet & Clank, which is an excellent game. Rounding out the top 15, I also have Final Fantasy 15, Battlefield 1, Oxenfree, and then the Call of Duty, the entire bundle, including Infinite Warfare and Modern Warfare Remastered. And then in the top 20, but I didn't really consider them for the top 10 too much, I have Gears of War 4, Quantum Break, Pokemon Go, Steep, and the Turing Test. Another honorable mention might have been my most played game of the year, and that's actually Rainbow Six Siege. And the game did come out last year, but a lot of updates have been made, and the game that we currently have is almost unidentifiable from the game that we got at launch, and Rainbow Six Siege continues to be my favorite shooter. Additionally, in terms of a comment about the actual year of 2016, I actually thought it was a pretty weak year for outstanding games. We got a lot of good games, but we didn't get many great games. I would have preferred having a couple of incredible games and a couple less games that were just good. Compared to last year or even 2013, I didn't think that a lot of these games were as memorable or as high of a caliber for their year as winners in those years. Either way, thank you guys so much for watching. Again, leave your top 10 in the list below. If you disagree with one of the games in my list, feel free to tell me why in the comments down below without being a dick about it. Feel free to leave a like on the video if you found it entertaining. Special thanks to Drop Dead Artemis for supporting the show on Patreon, and hopefully I see you guys next time. Peace.